So I don't have too much planned for this specific video, but I really wanted you guys to be aware of something called presentation mode. We're just going to explore this for a little bit, so don't worry about taking in everything that I talk about. Just make sure that you're aware that this exists. So presentation mode is, if we go down here, you can see this little presentation mode icon. If you click on that, everything goes blank. So let's click on it again to get back into this mode. So what presentation mode is it basically a separate or an alternate patcher window or patcher view of your patch. And you can select what goes into that view. So just as an example, let's click on this integer box, this integer object, right click on it, go down to add to presentation. And then when I deselect it, you can see it's got this purple highlight here. And what that means is that when I do this again, I go back into presentation mode, it shows up in my presentation mode. Now the great thing about presentation mode versus patching mode here is that I can now, in presentation mode, move this around to wherever I want. When I go back into patching mode, it hasn't affected its location. So that way I can have all this kind of complicated mess going on in here, and then when I'm actually interacting with it, I can make all of that disappear and then just have the objects here that I want to focus on or control, just the useful ones. So what I'm going to do is highlight these three, I guess these 6 objects, so these 3 number boxes and their labels, and then I'll right click and add to presentation and then go back into presentation mode, and I'll arrange these in a way that would be useful here. Okay. Nice little trick is to select everything, and then for me the shortcut is Control-Shift-A, but I'm not sure what it is on Mac, but you can do auto align and it'll make sure that these are all aligned well. Let's move that over a little bit. Okay, so that's very useful. Something else we might want is this main output, that main gain, as well as the DAC. So let's do that. Right click, add to presentation. Okay, we'll move this up here. Maybe we can put this right there. Align it like that. Now we do have 2 of these, so you can think of maybe an interesting way to combine these because we don't want to confuse the 2. Let's do add to presentation again. And now maybe what we want to do is something like this, so that we don't just have an exact duplicate of this. We could bring this frequency to under there, speed to right there, and depth to right there. And what we could do is add a comment that says maybe synth1. Okay, and we'll copy paste synth2. Now you'll notice we're in presentation mode and I was still able to add an object. And I'll put that there. Let's go back to the patcher mode, and we'll notice now this just kind of overlaps. It's a little messy to do that, to add objects while we're in this mode, but just make sure that if you do that, you come back and maybe organize these. Let's see, that would make sense if we put this here. And you'll notice these are the original sizes again, so you can actually resize the objects. Just as an example, what if we resized this to be a bit bigger and this to be longer? You'll watch this will shrink as we go back to the patcher mode. Nice and convenient. Except we don't really want a bit that big. We might actually want it smaller. Okay, and we don't need these anymore. So rather than delete them, let's right click and say remove from presentation. Okay, that's nice and straightforward. Let's see how well this works. So if I lock it, I turn this on, There we go. Much nicer than having to control it from here and try to parse out, I guess, your meaningful number boxes and parameters. So a couple more things about presentation mode. If you go into Inspector, right here, this icon, let's turn that off, and you click this P right here, which says Show Patcher Inspector. And then let's scroll down under View. I've got all selected here, by the way, so if you've just got basic, it'll just look like this, which I guess that's fine because what we're looking for is Open in Presentation for that option right here. If we select that, that means that if we save the patch and then we open it up again, it'll open up by default as in presentation mode. So if you never really need to look at any of this again after you've designed something or say you've got something for performance, then you could just have it by default open up in presentation mode. When you're editing, that can get kind of annoying to have to go into the patcher mode every time you open up your patch. So additionally, we can add some other visual elements to our patcher mode. If you go up to here to these options to add object, the plus icon, and you go into interface, then panel, this is a great way to kind of create, I guess, if you've got like more than one module, this would be a nice way to create backgrounds, to separate them. So you can come here and go, let's see, send to back. And you'll notice the color kind of washes out some of that text, makes it confusing. So let's go over into the inspector. I'm just going to click, actually that's all we need. Let's go to color and I don't know, let's get like a nice kind of pale cyan going on there. You'll notice there's a gradient. If you want to change it to just a single color, then you can click on this gradient right here, that little arrow, and select color fill, and then select your color from there. Now, if you want to keep the gradient, then these are the two icons that are both colors of the gradient. So maybe we could do a slight gradient just to stylize it just a little bit. Okay, and then border size. Right now there's no border. Let's do a border of 3 pixels or so. And that border color doesn't really make sense, so I'm just gonna go back here, click on that. All border color. I could just do a black border like that. Okay, there we go. We lock it. And now we have a nice little module with everything that we need. We don't have to worry about any of this. I should also point out that with these objects, you can go in here and actually change those colors as well. So say you really wanted to distinguish between synth 1 and synth 2. That's pretty intense green there, but you could do that. Also, it might be a good idea if you're using a color for something specific, you can create your own little palettes here, save colors, so that it would make sense. So maybe anything involving synth 1 could be that green. And I believe you can also change, the text color, also what that triangle color is for highlighted, or just its standard color. Okay, so have fun with that. I find that this is best to do when you're finished designing on this end, because it gets kind of confusing as far as, I don't know, what this design should actually be, because you don't really know what's important until you're finished designing things on this end. At the same time, that doesn't have to stop you from using these panel objects in the patcher mode, just to make things very clear. It might not be a bad idea. Right click and send to back for that. Okay, so you notice that's way clear too, but I copied and pasted, and it will remain, it'll copy over its presentation settings if something's in presentation mode. So we'll go into here and do remove from presentation because we just want that one in here. There we go. So that's even just a lot clearer for us. And say we wanted to differentiate this, we could do a similar thing like this. Send to back. Now you'll notice this makes it much easier to understand groupings of objects when we do something like this. Send to back. There it is. Goodness. Okay. Yeah, I think this is really, really useful for both designing your patches and processing, and it's very, very useful for designing an actual interface for how you'll interact with these. So go ahead and explore all of that and let me know if you have any questions.